For 3 centuries, Terra Prime remained silent. No voices left its worlds. No envoys crossed the stars. The galaxy forgot the sound of human words, until their name became little more than a joke whispered in council halls. A primitive race, they said. A fragile people who had destroyed themselves in their own foolish wars. Yet silence is not always the language of the defeated. Sometimes it is the patience of a predator. And then, one night in the cold void of space, the stars changed. At the edges of Concord territory, where dying suns cast only faint, colorless light, vast shapes emerged from the darkness. One by one, colossal black warships drifted into view, silent, unhurried, like shadows carved from iron. Their hulls were scarred, their surfaces jagged, as if they had been forged in forgotten battles no one remembered. They bore no flags, no symbols, no plea for peace. The ships did not speak. They only waited. Every Concord world received the same message, a simple phrase carried in every tongue known to the stars. We missed the meetings. It was not a threat. It was not an apology. It was a reminder. And at the center of this fleet, aboard the flagship Oblivion's Spear, stood Admiral Kalen Dravik. His face was weathered by years of silent wars that had never been recorded, his eyes dark with the weight of memory. He had not come to talk. He had come to make the galaxy remember what it had chosen to forget. Because Terra Prime had been watching. Terra Prime had been listening. And now, at last, Terra Prime had returned. For 3 centuries, Terra Prime's skies had been quiet. No signals left its surface, no starships crossed the black between the worlds. To the stellar Concord, it was as if humanity had simply died, forgotten, irrelevant, erased from history. But the truth was far darker. Long ago, in the age of first contact, humans had reached the stars with hope. Their early ships were fragile, their explorers naive but eager, offering friendship to species older and stronger. At first, the galaxy welcomed them. Humans were curious, passionate, inventive, an oddity in the grand halls of alien empires. But that welcome had not lasted. As humans ventured further, they became prey. Colonies vanished without explanation. Explorers sent out desperate messages before disappearing forever. Science vessels returned as wreckage or did not return at all. And when the truth emerged, it was unbearable. The Concord had allowed it. Behind its proud laws and golden banners, it had sanctioned experiments on living humans, vivisections in cold laboratories, and slave trades on distant worlds. To them, humans were volatile and emotional, useful as tools, but unworthy of trust or power. The betrayal had been total. At first, Terra Prime had fought back. Small wars were waged in the shadows, rescue missions, raids on hidden facilities, but every attempt ended in tragedy. Humanity lacked the fleets, the weapons, the alliances to resist. Each battle fought only brought more punishment, more disappearances. The galaxy, it seemed, had judged humanity guilty of existing. So Terra Prime made a choice. They fell silent. It was a silence born not of surrender, but of strategy. The diplomatic corps was dissolved. The great fleets were hidden away, their signals faked to look like civilian transports. The galaxy was allowed to believe that humanity had destroyed itself in petty wars or faded away in isolation. All the while, beneath barren moons and dead asteroids, something else was happening. Entire generations grew up inside hidden training camps, their lives forged into weapons. Shipyards the size of cities were buried deep beneath the crusts of airless worlds. Artificial intelligences plotted campaigns that would take centuries to perfect. Humanity had learned the lesson of patience. Admiral Kalen Dravik was one of those who remembered the old days. As a young soldier, he had been part of a doomed rescue attempt, an operation to recover captives from a secret Concord facility. He still saw their faces in his dreams, men, women, and children locked in cages, their bodies marked by cruel experiments. He had escaped that night, carrying with him only guilt and rage. When Terra Prime withdrew from the galaxy, Dravik followed orders. But deep inside, he made a promise. He would never forget. For decades, he climbed the hidden ranks of Terra's silent war machine. He helped design strategies for battles that might not come for centuries. He trained soldiers who would never see sunlight. He watched as new generations were born with one purpose: to survive, and to return. There were nights he questioned the path they had taken. He knew what they were building, a war not for liberation, but for judgment. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered the images smuggled out by defecting alien scientists, footage of human children dissected alive, explorers chained and mocked as they died. It was not hatred that drove him. It was something colder. Memory. When the day finally came, the fleets emerged from hiding. One by one, colossal ships rose from the shadows of moons and dead stations. Their hulls were black, scarred, and jagged, built not for beauty but for terror. Dravik stood on the bridge of the flagship Oblivion's Spear, gazing at the void ahead. Around him, his crew moved in silence, their faces set like stone. They all knew what this moment meant. He closed his eyes briefly, as if weighing the burden of the years. "We waited," he whispered to himself. "Now they will remember." Moments later, the fleet's first message left Terra Prime's silence behind. It was not long, nor loud. "We missed the meetings." And across the galaxy, those who once laughed at humanity felt the first stirrings of fear. Because silence, they finally understood, had never meant weakness. It had meant that Terra Prime was waiting for the day it would return, not as a beggar, but as the judge. For the people of Terra Prime, silence became a way of life. Cities no longer sent messages to the stars. Trade routes were cut, embassies shuttered. The skies above Terra were empty, but deep beneath the planet's surface, life changed in ways that outsiders would never see. The great governments of old Earth had dissolved, uniting under one purpose: the survival of their species. They created hidden sanctuaries carved into the bones of dead worlds, entire civilizations living beneath the crust of barren moons. It was in these secret places that the next generations of humanity were born. Children were raised under artificial suns, never knowing the blue sky of old Terra. Their lullabies were not songs of peace, but tales of betrayal, of explorers who reached too far, of colonists taken and never seen again. They grew up learning the names of the lost, reciting them like prayers before they slept. By the age of 5, they learned to hold a weapon. By 10, they were trained in tactics, survival, and the cold discipline of patience. These children were told again and again, "The galaxy will forget us. We must never forget ourselves." In the subterranean halls of Citadel Eclipse, Kalen Dravik watched as these generations grew. He was no longer young, his hair streaked with gray, his face weathered by time. Yet he still walked among the training grounds, observing the youths as they fought and learned. He saw determination in their eyes, but also something that troubled him, an emptiness. These children did not laugh as freely as he once had in his youth. Their games were war simulations, their friendships forged through hardship. They had never known the simple joys of exploration, of wonder at the stars. For them, the galaxy was not a frontier, it was an enemy. Dravik carried this weight in silence. Every night, as he looked out at the artificial horizon of Citadel Eclipse, he asked himself the same question. If we win, what will be left of us? But the memories of the past always answered him. He could still see the footage smuggled from the Concord labs human captives experimented on like animals. He could still hear the final messages of explorers begging for help that never came. And so, each time doubt rose, he buried it. The Eclipse Vanguard Terra Prime's hidden fleet grew in secret for centuries. Entire shipyards were concealed within hollowed asteroids, powered by reactors that gave off no detectable signals. These ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Built from alloys scavenged from derelict Concord stations, their designs were jagged, brutal, efficient. No banners marked their surfaces, they carried no symbols of nations long gone. Each vessel was named for something humanity had lost: the Orphan's Wrath, Ashes of Ganymede, Silent Vow. Dravik visited the shipyards often. He would walk among the colossal hulls in progress, running his hands along their cold metal surfaces. Each one felt like a tombstone. He knew that when the time came, these ships would not be tools of liberation. They would be instruments of judgment. Yet he also knew there was no other path. They must remember, he would say quietly to himself. Even if it costs us everything. As the years turned to decades, and decades to centuries, the outside galaxy stopped speaking of humans altogether. But inside Terra Prime, in the underground cities and silent shipyards, the preparation never ceased. Every generation swore the same oath. We will not forgive. We will not forget. When we rise, the stars will remember our name. In the final years before the fleet's awakening, Dravik stood in the command chamber of Citadel Eclipse, gazing at the tactical displays of 1,000 warships ready for deployment. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the terrible certainty of what was to come. For so long, he had dreamed of this moment. And yet, as the day approached, he could not help but wonder. Were they still fighting for justice? Or had they already become what they once hated? Far above, beyond the dead moons of Terra Prime, the Eclipse Vanguard slept like a beast beneath the ice. The galaxy believed humans extinct. But in the darkness, 1,000 black eyes waited to open. And when they did, the stars themselves would tremble. For centuries, the Eclipse Vanguard had slept in the dark. Its colossal ships rested beneath the icy crusts of forgotten moons, hidden in hollow asteroids and deep orbital graveyards. They were ghosts, waiting for the call that would wake them. And then, one day, that call came. In the command chamber of Citadel Eclipse, the air was heavy with a silence more profound than fear. Holographic displays lit the vast room with a pale glow, outlining the sleek silhouettes of 1,000 warships now stirring to life. Admiral Kalen Dravik stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked older than ever, the weight of 3 centuries pressing on his shoulders. "Is it time?" asked Commander Saran Vale, his voice calm but edged with anticipation. Dravik didn't answer at first. His eyes lingered on the tactical displays, the names of each ship scrolling across the interface. Ashes of Ganymede. The Silent Vow. Children of Titan. Each one was a memorial, a reminder of what had been taken. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but low. "Yes," he said. "It is time." The shipyards erupted into motion. Engines long dormant roared to life, shaking loose centuries of ice and dust. Massive doors opened in the crust of dead moons, revealing fleets that had been hidden from the galaxy for generations. One by one, the black warships rose into the void. They moved slowly, deliberately, like predators that knew they had no reason to rush. Inside the flagship Oblivion's Spear, Dravik walked through the long corridors as the crew prepared for departure. The faces he passed were hardened and silent men and women who had been raised for this very moment. Yet as he looked at them, Dravik felt no triumph. He remembered their childhoods, those narrow, steel training halls deep underground. The laughter they never had. The wonder they had never known. "This is the price we paid," he thought bitterly. A generation raised not to live, but to avenge. As the fleet broke free from their hiding places, the stars themselves seemed to shift. Across Concord space, astronomers on distant worlds were the first to notice strange gravitational signatures, hundreds at first, then thousands, all carrying the unmistakable mark of human engineering. On the bridge of Oblivion's Spear, a communications officer turned to Dravik. "All ships in position, Admiral. Awaiting your command." Dravik's gaze swept across the starfield ahead. He thought of the old councils, their halls filled with false smiles and false promises. He thought of the explorers who had died begging for help that never came. He let the silence stretch a moment longer, as if honoring the dead one last time. "Send it," he said. Across the galaxy, every Concord world received the same message at once. It was not a demand. It was not a plea. Just 4 words, carried in every language known to the stars. "We missed the meetings." The reaction was immediate. On diplomatic worlds, officials stared at the message in stunned silence. On military outposts, alarms blared as panicked officers scrambled to verify the signals. Some laughed nervously at first, thinking it a hoax. But then the sensor data came in. One by one, images of the fleet appeared, vast black warships, scarred and jagged, arrayed across the borders of Concord space like silent tombstones. They bore no flags. They made no threats. They simply waited. In the capital halls of the stellar Concord, panic rippled through the council chambers. Ministers shouted over one another. Some demanded immediate negotiations. Others called for preemptive strikes. Yet beneath the noise was something deeper: fear. For centuries, They had believed humans to be a dead species, a forgotten mistake. Now they had returned, not as supplicants, but as executioners. On the bridge of Oblivion's spear, Dravik stood motionless as the message was confirmed delivered. Commander Vale stepped closer, studying him. "They'll remember now," Vale said quietly. Dravik's eyes remained on the stars. "They will," he replied. "But they will also learn what it means to be remembered." And in that moment, every world of the Concord felt the same cold realization. Silence had never meant surrender. Terra Prime had been waiting. And the storm they had sown was finally here. In the grand chamber of the stellar Concord, chaos reigned. The room, once a place of calm debate and polished speeches, had become a storm of shouting voices. Representatives of 100 species argued over one another, their holographic displays flickering with emergency alerts. "They cannot possibly have built such a fleet," hissed Minister Forlin of the Drixeel Combine, his insectoid mandibles twitching nervously. "Humans are primitives, nothing more than savages who could never compete with us." "They are primitives," snarled another, a reptilian diplomat with gold-ringed eyes. "But even savages can become monsters if you leave them long enough in the dark." "We should negotiate," said a soft-voiced envoy from the Etheri Enclave. Her translucent skin shimmered with anxiety. "This show of force, perhaps they only want recognition, reparations for the past dash." "Recognition?" Forlin snapped, his antennae rigid with fury. "They come with black warships and silence, not envoys. They are not here to talk. They are here to judge us." The council fell quiet at that, for they all knew he was right. From every border world came reports, colossal human ships appearing in perfect formation, like a wall of steel against the stars. They made no demands. They fired no weapons. But their presence was suffocating. The fleet did not move. It simply waited. It was a warning and a promise. Far from the council chambers, aboard the Oblivion's spear, Admiral Kalen Dravik stood before a vast star map. The positions of Concord fleets glimmered in faint red light, surrounded now by the growing encirclement of the Eclipse vanguard. Commander Sarin Vale approached quietly, his steps echoing on the metallic floor. "They're panicking," Vale said. "Spies report emergency councils across their core worlds. They don't know whether to beg or to fight." Dravik's gaze remained fixed on the map. "They'll fight," he said softly. "Pride will not let them kneel. Not yet." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the ship's systems and the distant, rhythmic thrum of the engines. "Do you ever wonder," Vale asked at last, "what we've become? We trained children to fight a war they never chose. We buried our joy to raise fleets of ghosts. And now, as they look at us, do you think they see liberators? Or executioners?" Dravik closed his eyes briefly. "They see what they made," he said. "And that is enough." Back in the council chamber, panic turned to resolve. The Concord's highest-ranking military officer, Admiral Corvustilin, stood tall at the center of the hall. His three eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the assembled representatives. "They think silence makes them untouchable," Tillin said. His voice was steady, confident. "But they are fractured. isolated. They have not fought a true war in centuries. We will remind them they are still a minor species. He activated a display, revealing the planned fleet movements. We strike first. Hit their outer colonies. Cut their supply lines. Destroy their communications. When they are forced to retreat, we will demand their surrender on our terms. The room filled with murmurs of agreement. Pride, as Dravik had predicted, outweighed fear. But deep inside, many of the counselors felt the same cold dread. The humans had not returned with banners of conquest. They had returned with silence. And silence was far more terrifying than words. That same night, aboard the Oblivion Spear, Dravik met privately with Vale in the command chamber. "They'll strike soon," Vale said. "Yes," Dravik replied. "And we'll let them." Vale frowned. "Let them?" Dravik's eyes were hard as stone. "They've forgotten what fear feels like. When they strike, we will remind them not with fire, but with memory. Let them see the cost of every life they took from us before we take the first from them." Vale studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "They'll never forget after this," he said. "That," Dravik murmured, "is the point." Far across the galaxy, fleets of the Stellar Concord began to mobilize. Hundreds of warships departed from shipyards and orbital stations, their captains filled with a mix of confidence and desperation. They believed humans had grown arrogant in isolation. They believed the fleet was a bluff. They were wrong. Because Terra Prime had not spent 3 centuries preparing for conquest. They had spent 3 centuries preparing for judgment. The fleets of the Stellar Concord moved with grim determination. Hundreds of warships slipped through phase rifts and silent gates, converging on the edge of Terra's claimed space. Their target was Crya Station, a small mining outpost built into the frozen crust of a hollow moon. To Concord's strategists, it was perfect, poorly defended, strategically vulnerable, and symbolically important. Admiral Corvustilin, aboard his flagship Devotion's Wound, stood tall on the bridge as his fleets assembled. "Humans will learn their place today," he said coldly. "Strike hard. Strike fast. Take the colony and broadcast it across their networks. Show them we are still the masters of these stars." Orders rippled through the fleets. Engines roared to life. The ships plunged through the darkness toward Crya Station. But Crya Station was not what it seemed. The outpost lay silent, its structures half buried in ice, thin trails of vapor rising from rusted vents. No ships patrolled its orbit. Its landing bays were quiet, doors sealed shut as if abandoned. "This will be over in hours," said Tillin with confidence. It would be over in minutes, just not as he expected. Hidden beneath the thick ice fields surrounding the station were hundreds of dormant devices, their surfaces crusted with frost and rock. To Concord's sensors, they appeared to be debris from old mining operations. They were not. They were mines, gravitational warheads built to split capital ships in half. As the first fleet pushed through the upper atmosphere, strange readings began to spike on their scanners. "Unstable mass fluctuations detected," a sensor officer reported nervously. "Mining waste," another replied. "Ignore it. Proceed with approach." The next moment, the first mine detonated. The Athenari Bolt, an Arkan battle cruiser, was torn open like paper. Its core exploded in a blinding flash, shredding 2 escort ships nearby. Shards of molten debris ripped through the void, tearing holes in surrounding frigates. Panic erupted across the fleet. Unknown weapons, multiple detonations detected. Shields failing, engines offline dash. Before they could react, 100 more mines activated. The debris field around Cryo Station came alive with fire and death, each detonation sending shockwaves through the tightly packed fleet. Ships collided as captains desperately tried to evade. Communications devolved into chaos, screams, static, and orders that came too late. And then, amid the carnage, a single message broke through every Concorde comm channel. It was a man's voice. Calm. Cold. Unyielding. You came to our edge thinking we would run. You thought wrong. Aboard the Oblivion's Spear, Admiral Kalen Dravik watched the slaughter unfold from a distant vantage point. His expression did not change as red icons enemy vessels winked out one by one on the star map. Commander Saran Vale stood beside him. They're dying like animals, Vale said quietly. They chose this, Dravik replied. His voice carried no anger, no triumph, only certainty. By the time the last detonation faded, nearly half of Talon's fleet was gone. What remained was scattered and broken, ships drifting in silence, engines gutted, comms filled with the dying cries of their crews. Yet not a single human warship had fired a shot. When the survivors limped back to Concorde space, they carried with them a single recording. The last thing their sensors had captured before retreating was a phrase burned into the frozen walls of Cryo Station, illuminated in the cold light of the moon. This is the cost of silence. Across the galaxy, fear spread like wildfire. The Concorde had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had been humiliated, defeated not by overwhelming firepower, but by cunning, patience, and memory. Worlds that had once mocked humans now whispered their name in terror. On the Oblivion's Spear, Dravik turned away from the displays. It has begun, Vale said. Dravik's gaze was distant, unreadable. They will come again, he said. And when they do, we will show them that memory cuts deeper than any blade. The destruction of the Concorde fleet at Cryo Station spread fear through every star system. Yet fear was not enough for Terra Prime. Admiral Kalen Dravik knew that if the galaxy was to truly remember, it would take more than warships and clever traps. The Concorde needed to feel the weight of its sins. And so, deep within the vaults of Citadel Eclipse, Commander Saran Vale activated a program that had been buried in secrecy for over 2 centuries. It was called the Phantom Directive. The directive was older than even Vale himself. It had begun in the early years of Terra's silence, a desperate attempt to create soldiers who could fight in ways normal humans could not. Children had been taken, not stolen, but given by parents who believed in the cause. They were raised not with love, but with purpose. From the age of 5, their bodies were altered, their reflexes sharpened, their minds molded to obey without hesitation. They were trained in darkness, learning to kill as easily as breathing. They spoke little. They felt little. They remembered everything. When the directive was completed, these soldiers were sealed away in cryogenic vaults, waiting for the day they would be needed. That day had come. Vale walked the long corridor lined with cryopods, each one glowing with a cold blue light. His boots echoed against the steel floor. Technicians worked silently, inputting codes, checking systems. "How many?" Vale asked. 47 units ready for deployment," a technician replied. "Neural synchronization stable. Aggression index, high." "Good," Vale muttered. "Let them be angry. We're going to need that." One by one, the pods opened. Steam hissed into the air as the soldiers stepped forward. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, the result of neural augmentations. Their faces were expressionless, but behind their silence was something far worse than hatred purpose. Vale studied them for a long moment before speaking. "You've slept for generations. You were born for this war. Do you remember why?" As one, the soldiers replied in a low, unified voice. "To make the galaxy remember." Their first target was Varthan 9, a hidden Concord research moon. It was a place of horrors, where countless humans had been dissected, experimented on, and discarded like failed experiments. Vale had studied the records. He knew the names of the victims. He had memorized their faces. "This moon is where it began," he told the soldiers as they armed themselves. "Erase it. Leave nothing standing." The assault came swiftly, without warning. Cloaked dropships pierced the thin atmosphere of Varthan 9, landing silently on the frozen surface. The phantom soldiers moved like shadows, their footsteps soundless on the icy ground. The first wave of guards died without ever knowing they had been attacked. The phantoms killed with surgical precision, blades through gaps in armor, rail slugs to the skull, every strike perfectly placed. Inside the laboratories, panicked researchers tried to erase data, to destroy evidence. They were cut down where they stood. Vale entered the main research chamber himself. In the center of the room was a large containment pod. Inside floated a young human girl, barely 12 years old, her body scarred with surgical markings. Her eyes were open, but empty. Vale's jaw tightened. "She won't wake," a phantom soldier said quietly. "I know," Vale replied. He placed an explosive charge on the pod's base, his expression cold. By the end of the hour, Varthan 9 was ash. Every guard was dead. Every researcher executed. Every file wiped from existence. On the scorched ground outside the ruins, the phantoms left behind a single phrase, burned into the metal of a collapsed tower. "This is the price of forgetting." Aboard the Oblivion's spear, Dravik received the report in silence. Vale stood across from him, still wearing the black armor of the directive. "It's done," Vale said. Dravik stared at the display for a long time, saying nothing. Finally, he asked, "Were there survivors?" Vale shook his head. "None." There was a pause. "And how did it feel?" Dravik asked quietly. Vale's eyes were unreadable. "Efficient." Dravik turned away, his jaw tightening. Every victory brought Terra closer to vengeance. But as he stood there, he could not escape a single thought. With every step we take, we look more like the monsters we swore to destroy. The Concorde had been humiliated at Cryos Station. They had watched Varthan 9 burn, its atrocities laid bare for all to see. Fear now consumed their halls of power, but fear alone would not stop them. In desperation, they turned to a project long buried beneath secrecy, Project Helion. Project Helion was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a person. Decades earlier, when Terra Prime still attempted diplomacy, Concord scientists had stolen fragments of human DNA. They had studied it, altered it, reshaped it, seeking to create the perfect soldier. Helion was the result. A human in flesh, but stripped of weakness, of hesitation, of morality. He was built to be everything the Concord believed humanity could never be: obedient, ruthless, flawless. But they had underestimated one thing. Helion remembered. When he awoke in the underground vault of a dead moon, his eyes glowed with a cold, unnatural light. Silver veins pulsed beneath his skin, carrying liquid metal through his body. He spoke only once to his handlers. "You created me to kill them. I will show them what they taught me." And then he vanished, moving with precision and speed that even his creators could not control. A week later, the skies of Sci-Fi Prime, a core Concord world, erupted in chaos. Terra's fleet had arrived in orbit, their black hulls blotting out the sun. They made no demands, no ultimatums. They simply waited, as they always did. But on the planet below, a strange signal activated the planetary defense grid. Orbital cannons turned, not on Terra's ships, but on the planet itself. Cities burned. Millions screamed as the ground split open under bombardment. On the Oblivion Sphere, Admiral Kalen Dravik watched the chaos unfold on the tactical display. "What is happening?" Commander Sarenvale demanded. Dravik's eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. "Biometric match, human." Vale turned to him sharply. "Human? From where?" Dravik's voice was cold. "It's not one of ours." Moments later, the face appeared on every Terran display. It was a man, broad-shouldered, head shaved, eyes glowing with artificial light. His movements were too precise, too smooth to be natural. But it was his voice that struck Dravik like a blade. "Kalen Dravik," the man said, his tone calm, almost gentle. "You were my teacher. And now, I am your reckoning." Dravik's chest tightened as he recognized him, Asher Helion, once a gifted young strategist in Terra's early Black programs. Helion had vanished decades ago during a Concord raid. They had not killed him. They had turned him. The battle that followed was chaos. Helion moved like a phantom across the burning city. He did not kill randomly, he killed deliberately, dismantling defense networks, hacking command grids, turning the Concord's own weapons against themselves. Every action was efficient, calculated, terrifying. Dravik assembled a strike team. There would be no orbital bombardment, no distant execution. "This ends face to face," he said grimly. Vale hesitated. "You want him alive?" Dravik's eyes were cold. "No, I want him human long enough to know why I'm killing him." The drop pod slammed into the ruined city. Smoke choked the sky, ash falling like snow. Helion stood at the base of the planetary AI core, waiting. His expression was unreadable, his silver-veined hands loose at his sides. When Dravik stepped forward, their eyes met, teacher and student, predator and prey, though neither was certain which was which. "I remember your voice," Helion said softly. "You taught me that survival meant becoming stronger than those who hurt us. I learned that lesson well." "You were supposed to be better than this," Dravik said, his weapon raised. "You were supposed to fix what we couldn't." Helion tilted his head slightly, almost curious. "I did," he replied. "I fixed the illusion." The fight was brutal. Helion was faster, stronger, unburdened by hesitation or fear. Dravik fought with everything he had, every strike a memory of the boy Helion had once been. Blow after blow landed, plasma rounds tearing through Helion's artificial flesh, blades clashing against enhanced bone. Yet still Helion stood, blood of light spilling from his wounds. "I am what you made me," Helion whispered, dropping to one knee. "No," Dravik said, placing the explosive charge at the AI core's base. "You are what they made, from what we left behind." The charge detonated. The AI core collapsed in a storm of fire and metal, swallowing Helion's final scream as the city burned around them. Later, aboard the Oblivion's spear, Dravik sat in silence. He had killed Helion. But as he stared into the void, one thought lingered, cold and heavy. Perhaps we had already lost long before the war began. The fall of Sci-Fi's prime shattered the stellar concord. Its fleets were scattered, its leaders dead or in hiding. Worlds once proud of their power now trembled in silence, their skies haunted by black Terran warships that hung like omens of judgment. Terra Prime had won. No Concord world dared to resist. Entire species surrendered without a fight, offering tribute, resources, even their histories as penance for crimes they had once denied. But there were no celebrations among the Terrans. Victory felt hollow. Admiral Kalen Dravik stood alone on the observation deck of the Oblivion's spear, watching the quiet stars. Behind him, Commander Saran Vale entered, his black armor scorched and battered from countless campaigns. "It's over," Vale said simply. "The Council worlds are ashes. Their fleets are gone. There's no one left to fight." Dravik didn't answer. Vale stepped closer. "We won, Kalen. After centuries of silence, we finally won." Slowly, Dravik turned to face him. His eyes were tired, hollow. "No," he said quietly. "We didn't win. We just survived louder than they expected." Across the Terran-controlled systems, order was enforced with an iron hand. Statues of Concord leaders were torn down, their monuments burned. Their archives were erased. Children in alien schools were taught new histories, ones that told of human suffering, of betrayal, of vengeance. But whispers began to spread, even among Terrans themselves. Had they become the very monsters they once hated? The first rebellion came on Oralis Drift, a Terran colony that had once sworn absolute loyalty. Dravik personally led the strike team to quash it, expecting traitorous aliens. Instead, he found humans, men and women who bore the tattoos of Terran military units, veterans of the same wars he had fought. They looked at him with defiance, not fear. One of them, Donovan Troz, a former field agent, spat blood onto the ground as he glared up at Dravik. "You taught us to fight," Troz said. "But you forgot to teach us how to stop." That night, Dravik sat alone in the war room of Citadel Eclipse. Reports of uprisings flashed across his screen, small, scattered acts of rebellion led not by Concord remnants, but by Terrans themselves. Commander Vale entered, placing a data slate on the table. "It's a kill list," Vale said. "Civilians. Dissidents. Separatists. If we purge them now, we can stop this before it spreads." Dravik stared at the names. So many of them were his own people. He set the slate down gently. "We can't kill our way into legacy," he said softly. Vale's eyes hardened. "We didn't come this far to hold hands." Dravik looked up at him, weary but resolute. "No. We came this far to be remembered. But fear is not memory." That night, Dravik went to the most secure chamber of Citadel Eclipse, the Ashes Vault. Only 3 men in the galaxy knew it existed. 2 of them were already dead. He placed his hand on the biometric scanner. Access granted. On the terminal's screen appeared a single line. "Initiate protocol, Ashes." Dravik hesitated. His reflection stared back at him in the cold glow of the console. Then he pressed the key. Within hours, every Terran system was flooded with data. Footage of secret purges. Prison moons. Child experiments. Orbital bombings that had never been admitted. Every hidden atrocity Terra had committed to win this war laid bare for all to see. When Vale saw the broadcasts, his face twisted with rage. "You gave them everything," he said, his voice trembling. "I gave them the truth," Dravik replied. "You betrayed everything we built. All the fear, all the respect. We were gods." Dravik stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. "No. We were monsters wearing human skin." Vale did not kill him. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Dravik standing alone in the dark. The next morning, Dravik sent a final open transmission. "I was there when they called us vermin. When they dissected us. When they spat on our flag. I was there when terror rose, when we burned their empires to ash. But I am also here now. And I see what we became. We traded silence for dominance. Pain for power. But we lost something greater in the fire, our soul. Let this be the last war of forgetting. Let us be remembered not for what we destroyed, but for what we chose to leave standing." Dravik vanished after that day. Some said he died in the Red Mountains of Mars. Others whispered he left aboard a nameless ship, vanishing into the stars to seek redemption that no world could give him. But on every colony, every ship, every reclaimed world, a single plaque was raised. Here stood the last man of war. He taught us to fight and when to stop. Terra Prime ruled the stars. But its greatest victory was not the fear it inspired. It was the choice to finally end the silence, not with vengeance, but with memory. Centuries of silence had ended in fire. Terra Prime had risen from the ashes of betrayal, wielding memory as its deadliest weapon. Entire empires had fallen, their crimes dragged into the light, their arrogance ground to dust beneath black warships that had waited too long to be ignored. but the true warning was never the fleet. It was the lesson that power without conscience turns victors into monsters, just as cruelty once turned Terra's allies into butchers. Admiral Kalen Dravik left behind no throne, no crown, no empire carved in glory. Only a choice, a chance for humanity to be remembered not for its rage, but for its restraint. Across the galaxy, the last words of Terra's silent admiral lingered like an echo through the void. Let us be remembered not for what we destroyed, but for what we chose to leave standing. And so the story of Terra Prime became more than a tale of vengeance. It became a warning to all who believed that memory could be buried, that the weak could be forgotten. Because silence is never empty. Sometimes, silence is the sound of a storm waiting to be unleashed.